I remember the first time I saw the ad. It was one of those blinking banners on a news website. Participants needed for overnight study. Compensation, $50,000. Even the fine print seemed straightforward. Arrive at a designated location, sign a waiver, spend the night in a controlled room, and walk out with enough money to wipe my financial worries clean. The notice promised a legitimate, government-funded study to observe sleep patterns in stressful environments. It sounded weird, but to me, that was half the fun. I sent the link to my best friend, Kai. We were both struggling with student loans and rent. Kai messaged me back immediately. We'd be crazy not to sign up. That's how it began. Two broke friends, desperate to get ahead. The building we arrived at was an unremarkable concrete structure on the outskirts of town. Stark white walls, tinted windows, barely any signage. On the front door, there was a single piece of paper taped near the doorknob that read, "Participants, enter." Even that felt ominous, but we laughed it off. We'd watched too many horror movies. Real life wasn't like that, right? Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed with an unnatural hum. The reception area had only a metal desk, a plastic chair, and a smiling woman who wore a white lab coat and introduced herself as Dr. Hudson. "Welcome. You're right on time," she said, pushing a thick packet of forms across the desk. "Please read and sign these. This is a standard agreement. Confidentiality, assumption of risk, the usual." Kai leaned in to skim the pages. "That's a lot of disclaimers." "They need to protect themselves from lawsuits," I mumbled, scrawling my signature. 50 grand, I reminded myself. That was reason enough to push any reservations aside. We weren't the only ones there. 5 other participants sat in the waiting area, flipping through the same forms. Some looked younger than us, maybe recent college grads. One older man, perhaps mid-50s, caught my eye and gave a friendly nod. We all shared the same mixture of curiosity and cautious excitement. The first surprise came once we'd signed everything. Dr. Hudson pressed a button and a hidden door slid open at the end of the hallway. Beyond it was a short corridor lined with tinted glass. She led us through as if we were about to embark on a museum tour. "Tonight, we will be observing your ability to cope with isolation. Each of you will be staying in a specialized room for 8 hours," she explained while we walked. "The environment is carefully controlled: temperature, lighting, sound. We want to monitor your physiological reactions. You'll be given personal devices to log any discomfort." "Wait," a girl behind me spoke. Her name tag read Jennifer. "I thought we'd all be in one room together." Dr. Hudson's shoes clicked against the pristine tiles. "Oh no, the advertisement might have been a bit vague. Each participant gets their own separate room. But don't worry, you'll each still receive the same compensation." I glanced over at Kai. If we were separated, that removed the safety net. We'd planned on moral support if the environment became creepy or too intense. Kai just shrugged as if to say, "We made it this far. We're not backing out now." Finally, Dr. Hudson stopped in front of a thick metal door labeled Room B3. She turned to me. "You'll be staying here tonight. Please enter." Then she smiled, but there was a strange glimmer in her eyes. "And remember, no matter what you experience, you must remain inside the room until the 8 hours are up." Kai reached out, gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze, and mouthed, "See you in the morning." I returned his silent goodbye with a nod. Then I stepped inside B3. At first glance, room B3 wasn't particularly intimidating. Just 4 gray walls, a narrow cot, a small desk with an old-fashioned lamp, and a camera mounted high in the corner. A digital clock on the wall read 10:02 p.m. I assumed it marked the start of the experiment. Hanging on a hook next to the door was a tablet labeled Log Device. The instructions on the screen were brief: record all significant feelings or sensations. Do not leave the room until instructed. If you need assistance, press the emergency button. Please note, pressing the emergency button may result in forfeiture of compensation. Below the text was a large, tempting emergency icon. The realization that help was only a button press away comforted me. I can endure 8 hours, I told myself. It's just a weird room. I set my phone on the desk. No signal. That had to be part of the experiment. Total isolation. The air smelled sterile, like the waiting room of a hospital. A single vent droned softly, providing a faint background noise so it wasn't entirely silent. The lamp gave off a weak glow, making the corners of the room feel shadowy and remote. After pacing for a bit, I decided to sit on the cot. My mind raced with speculation about what stressful environment meant. Maybe they would reduce the oxygen levels or play unsettling noises. I imagined everything from jump scares to temperature extremes. But for the first hour, absolutely nothing happened. At about 11:10 p.m., the overhead light flickered once. Just a single flicker. Then normal again. I had begun feeling drowsy and realized I hadn't logged a single thing in the tablet. So I typed 11:11 p.m., slight flicker of lights. No discomfort, but feeling a bit uneasy, anticipating the next event. As soon as I set the tablet down, the overhead lights dimmed. Not completely off, but enough to cast the room in murky shadows. At the same time, the lamp on the desk flickered to life on its own, shining much brighter than before. Then it started to pulse, as if in tandem with a heartbeat. An illusion, maybe. Some sort of trick. I stood up to examine the lamp. The second I was within arm's reach, the overhead lights snapped off, and the lamp's glow intensified. Shadows stretched on the walls, distorting in ways that didn't make sense with my movements. A faint whisper seemed to brush against my ear. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded strange, echoing in a room that had no reason to echo. Goosebumps prickled along my arms. Remain calm, I reminded myself. It's all part of the experiment. I picked up the tablet again and wrote 11:25 p.m. Lights turned off. Lamp seems to be pulsing. Possible illusions of whispering. Heart rate elevated. When I tapped save, a new text scrolled across the screen, a message I hadn't typed. "Can you see me?" I froze. My reflection stared back at me in the tablet's dark glass. "What?" I whispered, half expecting the camera in the corner to produce a voice explaining it was just a test. Instead, the tablet's text vanished, replaced by the standard logging page. My mind must have been playing tricks on me, I reasoned. Then something scratched at the metal door, softly at first, then more insistent. My heart hammered. The vent overhead hissed louder, as if the airflow had suddenly doubled. The scratching continued, the sound sharp and frantic. Could it be another participant messing around, or one of the researchers trying to provoke a reaction? I crept toward the door, pressing my ear against it. "Hello? Is someone there?" The scratching stopped. A moment later, a raspy voice, so quiet I nearly missed it, came through the door. "Please, help." I stumbled back, heart pounding. The voice sounded weak, desperate. Again it whispered, "Help me, please." Whoever it was, they weren't messing around, but if I opened the door, I'd fail the experiment. $50,000, I reminded myself. But could I ignore someone in distress? I hovered by the emergency button on the tablet. Then I heard something else. A slow, dragging sound, as if a body were pulled across the floor outside. The sound receded, and soon, silence resumed. I sat on the cot, hugging my knees, counting the minutes. The overhead lights remained off, leaving me with only the flickering desk lamp. Sometimes it felt like the shadows on the wall flickered even when the lamp was still. The hiss from the vent never quieted, and I began to think it carried faint moans from somewhere outside. By 12:30 a.m., I tried to calm myself by rationalizing. They said it was a stressful environment. That voice must be a staged recording. If I believed it was all staged, I could endure it. Then I imagined Kai in his own separate room. Had he heard something similar? Was he also frightened? I got up to walk around again. That's when the camera high up in the corner whirred, shifting its angle to follow my movement. This time I saw the lens focusing, but I also noticed something behind the camera, a thin dark line like a hairline crack in the ceiling. It was new. I was sure it hadn't been there before. The crack widened almost imperceptibly, drooping down like it was breathing. That made no sense. I was about to climb onto the desk for a closer look when the whisper returned, but this time inside the room. "Stay," the whisper said, echoing as if from every corner. I spun, searching for the source, but the room was empty. "Stay. They're watching," it repeated, the voice trembling. My blood ran cold. The instructions told me not to leave, so it was no surprise a voice was telling me to stay. But it was the fear in that voice that unnerved me, like it was warning me, not commanding me, as if leaving the room was the lesser danger compared to something else. The overhead vent rattled again, and with it came a smell. Metallic. Rusty. My stomach turned. It reminded me of dried blood. Horrified, I grabbed the tablet. 12:40 a.m. Strange odor in the air. Overhead, crack in the ceiling. Disturbing whisper continuing. I hit save. This time the tablet's screen flickered, and for a split second I saw a grisly image I can barely describe. A dark corridor stained with red, a single sneaker lying on the floor, and a handprint smeared across a cement wall. Then it vanished, returning to my typed entry as if nothing happened. The next hour was a blur of tension. I tried pacing, jumping jacks, anything to keep my mind focused. The voice didn't return, but every so often, the overhead crack would shift slightly, as if breathing. Occasionally, the door would make a gentle thump, as if someone were leaning against it. My fear built, minute by minute, but some stubborn part of me refused to forfeit the money. At about 2 a.m., a dull beep sounded from the digital clock on the wall. It read, 4 hours remain in bright letters. Underneath was a line of text. Thank you for participating. Don't forget to record your experiences. I forced a chuckle at how bizarre this had become. 4 more hours, I told myself. I can do this. But my mind drifted to that voice in the hallway. I glanced at the emergency button on the tablet, my finger hovering. Number not yet. "Is everyone okay out there?" I shouted, hoping someone would hear. "Kai? Anybody?" No response. Just the droning vent. A wave of loneliness crashed over me. Maybe that isolation was the real test. Everything changed around 2:30 a.m. The door handle rattled violently, as though someone was trying to break in. I jumped to my feet, backing away. The rattling became a pounding. My heart thumped in tandem with the blows. "Who is it?" I screamed. There was a pause. Then, in a trembling voice, someone on the other side pleaded, "Please, I can't get out." They locked us in. The voice was definitely human, but I couldn't recognize it. "The doors, they won't open from the inside. It's not just one room. It's all of them." That didn't make any sense. We were each told to stay in a single room. So how was this person in a hallway with multiple locked doors? "Where's Dr. Hudson?" I shouted. I don't know," the voice stammered. "They said we'd get the money if we followed the rules, but people are vanishing. Please, let me in. Something's in the hallway." I froze. Letting this stranger in meant unlocking the door, which we'd been told not to do under any circumstances. Could it be a trap? Or maybe this is the real test, altruism versus survival. But the voice sounded so desperate, so real that my empathy overwhelmed me. My hand was on the door latch when a blood-curdling scream came from the hallway, cutting the air like a knife. Then nothing. Silence. No footsteps running, no plea for help. Just the rhythmic hush of the ventilation. Slowly, I removed my hand from the latch, heart slamming against my ribcage. I wanted to vomit. The reality of this experiment, whatever it truly was, felt too large, too horrifying to comprehend. I had zero illusions that this was a typical study anymore. Minutes later, the overhead light flickered back on, illuminating the entire room in a sterile glow. It was almost worse, seeing everything in unflattering clarity. The crack on the ceiling was gone. The door looked normal. Even the smell dissipated. I stared at the camera. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, tears of frustration burning my eyes. "You have to tell us something." The camera made no response, no mechanical whir. It just watched. As if in answer, the digital clock beeped again. This time it read, 3 hours remain. Underneath, new text scrolled by. Proceed to the next phase of the test. Then, to my horror, the door clicked. Not a frantic rattling or pounding, but a measured click of a lock being undone. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. They had specifically said, "Do not leave until instructed." So why unlock the door now? Tentatively, I turned the handle, letting the door swing open just an inch. The corridor beyond was dark, lit only by flickering emergency lights. "Hello?" I whispered. No answer. The hallway was eerily quiet. If the voice outside truly existed, it was gone now. The text on the clock repeated, "Proceed to the next phase of the test." Maybe they wanted me to leave the room. That was the instruction now. Gathering my courage, I took the tablet and stepped into the hallway. I emerged into a corridor of closed doors, each labeled similarly. Room B1, B2, B4, B5. Everything looked almost identical to my room's entrance. Some doors had scratch marks near the handle, deep grooves in the metal. One door, B2, was slightly ajar. A faint light glowed from within, accompanied by a steady drip, drip, drip. "Kai," I called, voice trembling. "Jennifer, anyone?" I moved slowly toward B2, each footstep echoing unnaturally. The corridor felt endless, like stepping into a dream where geometry twisted. Finally, I reached the door. "Hello." I pushed it open cautiously. Inside was a room like mine, but in shambles. The cot was overturned, the lamp broken, shards of glass scattered across the floor. The overhead light flickered, reflecting off something dark spattered on the walls. It looked like paint, but the metallic smell suggested otherwise. My stomach lurched. At the desk sat a motionless figure, a young man in a participant's t-shirt. I recognized him from earlier in the waiting area. He stared at the wall, his eyes wide with terror. Are you okay?" I managed. He didn't respond, didn't even blink. As I stepped closer, I realized he was breathing, but shallowly. In front of him lay his tablet with a single word scrawled across the screen. "Run." Suddenly, the overhead vent in that room snapped open. A black mass, impossible to describe, seemed to slither out like living shadow. It twisted in midair, reaching toward the man at the desk. Horror seized me. I stumbled backward. The man remained frozen in place, as if too paralyzed by fear to move. My fight-or-flight instinct kicked in. I backed out of room B2, nearly tripping over broken glass. As I retreated, the door slammed itself shut. A moment later, I heard a muffled scream. Then silence. My breath came in ragged gasps. This was no standard experiment. People were in real danger. Maybe the entire lab was orchestrating some monstrous phenomenon, or maybe it wasn't even human behind all this. I had no idea. All I knew was I needed to find Kai and a way out. I ran down the corridor, checking each door. Every door I tried was locked. The overhead lights flickered in and out, messing with my sense of direction. The building felt like a labyrinth. Eventually, I reached a dead end with a large metal door marked Staff Only. It was locked, of course, but I noticed a keypad on the wall. The tablet might hold some clue. I turned it on, ignoring my trembling hands, searching for anything that might help. The main screen was a jumbled mess of broken text. They can't hide. We're not alone. Code 8719 dash. The text glitched. Then I saw a name. Hudson. A flicker of red text beneath it read, Trapped. We're all trapped. With nothing else to go on, I punched 8719 into the keypad. A beep and a click. The door unlocked. I shoved it open, my pulse hammering. Inside was a cramped control room lined with monitors and computers. Multiple screens displayed video feeds of different rooms and corridors, like a twisted reality show. I scanned them, searching desperately for Kai. Then I spotted him. Room B6. Kai was on a cot, scanning the walls with a flashlight, clearly distraught but still moving. There you are, I breathed. So B6 existed somewhere in this complex. The label on the screen read Sub-Level B, so it wasn't on the same floor. That meant stairs or an elevator. My gaze shifted to a computer terminal where lines of code scrolled. There was a file labeled Experiment Status, Critical Failure. The text below it read, Entity Uncontained, All Subjects at Risk. My mind reeled. Entity. The black mass I saw in room B2, that voice in my corridor. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, my fear mingled with anger. This is bigger than we ever realized, I thought. They had unleashed something beyond normal science. Suddenly, the overhead speaker crackled to life, nearly making me jump out of my skin. Attention, Dr. Hudson's voice echoed, shaky and tense. All staff, prepare for full lockdown. Do not attempt to exit the facility. Repeat, do not. A sharp crash interrupted her announcement, followed by a choked scream and a burst of static. Then silence. My heart pounded so loud it hurt. Even the lead researcher was in danger. I tore myself away from the monitors. A map on the wall indicated a stairwell at the far end of the corridor. That had to lead to sub-level B. I stepped back into the hallway, hugging the walls as I navigated the flickering lights, ignoring the distant screams echoing from behind locked doors. A set of metal stairs led me downward. The deeper I went, the more oppressive the air felt, thick with that same metallic smell. At the bottom, a faint glow lit a sign labeled B6. I rounded the final bend and found a corridor similar to the one above, except the doors here were glass windows looking into vacant labs. Everything was in disarray, chairs overturned, lab equipment shattered. Red emergency lights pulsed. Kai! I shouted, hoping my voice might carry. A flicker of movement caught my eye at the far end. Someone stepped into view, holding a flashlight. It was Kai. We ran toward each other, relief flooding my chest. Oh my God, Kai breathed. What's going on? I heard screams. My door just unlocked, so I tried to find an exit. Then I saw these labs. I grabbed Kai by the shoulders. Listen, we have to get out. Something is roaming around. People are trapped. Maybe worse. Kai nodded, swallowing hard. I found a door that says exit, but it's locked tight. We might be able to break it. Lead the way, I said, adrenaline surging. We sprinted through B6's corridor until we found the door labeled exit. It was secured with a massive electronic lock that didn't respond to the tablet's code. I kicked it in frustration, accomplishing nothing but hurting my foot. That entity, I muttered, pacing. It's like a shadow. I saw it in one of the rooms. Kai's eyes widened. I caught a glimpse of something at the end of the hallway. It looked like it was seeping through the vents. Doctor, Hudson's losing control. We have to find another way. Maybe the control room upstairs. As we debated, the overhead vent rattled. We both froze. Then, from behind us, a guttural hiss echoed. A shape, shadows folding over themselves, spilled out of a nearby vent. It hovered close to the ceiling, twisting in unnatural contortions. With every flicker of the emergency lights, it seemed to shift closer. "Run!" Kai shouted. We sprinted back the way we came. The corridor behind us shrank into strobing red light. The faint hiss of the creature grew louder, as though it breathed behind our necks. We reached a T-junction, skidding to a stop. Left led to an unlit corridor, right led to a battered metal door. Without hesitation, we tore down the right hallway. The door had a broken window near the top. I could see more flickering light beyond it. We burst through, slamming it shut behind us. We found ourselves in another lab, smaller but lined with high-tech equipment. Liquid-filled vials lay shattered on the floor, and a large observation window looked out onto some dark holding chamber. The entire place reeked of chemicals. The overhead speaker crackled again, and Dr. Hudson's voice emerged, weaker now. "Facility meltdown. Lockdown in progress. If you can hear this, get out. Top exit only." Her voice dissolved into static. A wave of hopelessness crashed over me. The top exit, meaning where we came from. Possibly locked or blocked by that thing. Kai and I huddled near the observation window. We saw movement behind it, something large shifting in the darkness. My stomach lurched with the realization maybe that was the entity's original holding cell, now broken open. Suddenly, the metal door behind us bent inward with a thunderous clang. The shadowy figure was there, forcing its way through. "We have to do something," Kai breathed, eyes wide with terror. Without warning, the lab's overhead lights snapped on in a surge of power. A row of high-voltage electrical panels buzzed to life. My gaze darted from the panels to the observation window. An idea formed. "Kai, we can lure it into that chamber. Maybe we can re-engage the containment system." Kai nodded, desperation in his eyes. We scrambled to the controls, pressing switches. One labeled Emergency Containment lit up green. The console beeped. Chamber door unlocked. The door inside the chamber slid open, revealing a narrow passage that led into the lab. We backed away, bracing ourselves. The lab door tore open, and the shadowy mass slithered inside. The lights flickered under its presence as if the creature fed off electricity. Fear seized me, but I shouted, "Over here!" Mustering courage, I grabbed a piece of metal piping and banged it against the floor. It hissed, turning its amorphous form in our direction. In a horrifying display, the entity lunged forward, passing over tables and walls as if they didn't exist. Kai and I sprinted toward the observation chamber door, hoping it would follow. The creature pursued, unwavering. Just as it crossed the threshold, Kai slammed a button on the console. The chamber door sealed behind it with a thunderous clang. The creature screeched, thrashing violently against the walls. The window cracked under the force of its fury. Then Kai pressed another switch, labeled Containment Field. Sparks flew along the chamber's edges, creating a flickering barrier of electricity. The creature writhed, letting out a sound that rattled our bones. For a moment, we thought we had it trapped. But the cracks in the observation window grew, spider webbing. The entity slammed repeatedly, and we had no idea if the containment field would hold. "Come on," I said, urging Kai away from the console. "We need to find an exit. Now!" We ran through a side door that led to a staircase labeled Maintenance Access. As we ascended, the entire facility seemed to groan in protest. Distant alarms blared. Red lights pulsed overhead, painting everything in a nightmarish glow. At the top of the stairs, we found a rusted metal hatch. Kai and I pushed against it. For one agonizing second, it refused to budge. Then, with a sharp squeal, it gave way, revealing the night sky. Fresh air swept over us. We climbed out onto a cracked asphalt lot behind the building we'd originally entered. The stars above us were a surreal contrast to the horror we'd just escaped. We stumbled away, knees trembling. Behind us, the building's walls reverberated with mechanical clanks and faint screams from those still trapped inside. My chest tightened as I realized we left them behind. Some people were still inside. But returning was suicide. The place was in meltdown, locked down from the inside. Sirens began to wail in the distance, maybe local authorities responding to some hidden alarm. But I doubted they could handle what lurked below. Kai sank onto the asphalt, tears of shock in his eyes. I knelt beside him, pulling him into an embrace. We had survived. Barely. Our minds reeled, struggling to process everything. That was when a text alert vibrated on my phone. Somehow we had reception again. I lifted the phone with shaking hands, seeing a new notification. Experiment completed. $50,000 has been transferred to your account. My blood ran cold at the realization that the experiment's system still considered us participants who'd made it through. We exchanged horrified glances. We had done it. We had stayed in the facility until it allowed us to leave. Yet the price we paid in terror, the lives lost or devoured, none of it could ever be undone. Kai stared at me. "Now what?" he whispered. I looked at the building one last time, listening to the muffled sounds of chaos inside. "We get as far away as possible. We make sure no one else ever volunteers for anything like this again." Then we rose, supporting each other, hearts pounding with the memory of what we'd witnessed, what we'd survived. They paid us $50,000 to stay in that room, but the truth was brutally clear. We should have said no.